Hello and welcome back to Intuitive Psychology, the podcast. We are delighted to be here for season 2. I am one of your hosts, Sarah Gregg, and I am joined by my co-founder, my friend and co-host on this podcast, Jill Ritchie.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode. We're keeping it real again, and we are talking about something that is probably really important to us, having come from a corporate space before moving into our own coaching practice and business. The topic today is intuitive leadership. And actually, I mentioned corporate space purely because Sarah and I, for those of you who don't know, Sarah and I were in leadership positions within the corporate world. I was in a senior leadership role within corporate banking for just over 20 years. I know I don't look that young. Can I just say, if you're watching this on Spotify or YouTube, it says 1970 on my jumper. That is not the year I was born, okay? I was born in 1980. I just like the jumper. But I just wanted to tell you that, right? So just over 20 years in corporate, and had some incredible experiences with leaders in corporate. And I also equally, probably actually not equally, if I'm completely honest, not such great experiences with leaderships. But I always remember the ones that were really great, Sarah. And those ones actually, and we're going to talk about intuitive leadership today, but those were actually, even as I'm speaking right now, those were very intuitive leaders, and they led from an intuitive space. And what that did for me when I got to experience that was, number one, it allowed me to feel safe enough to bring my fullest potential to the space. And as a result of me being in my authenticity and leading from a intuitive led space, I was thriving. And not only was I thriving personally and deeply happy in the role that I was doing then, my team around me were thriving. I remember I was only 24 and I got taken into work in a bank. I will not name the bank. Mm-hmm. I was only 24 and I got put into this branch, and it was one of the bigger branches. So it was retail banking I was in back then. And I remember going in, and my boss at the time, I'll say his name, Sandy, he was absolutely brilliant. He was a great boss, and he just had a lot of belief in me, and he really allowed me to fully express who I was. But that branch there was about 84 branches, and that branch was second from the bottom. Nobody, I think I was recruited externally, so I hadn't worked my way in that space. I came from another organisation, but I don't think anyone wanted to take that branch on because it was so challenging for so many ways. The staff engagement, the culture was at an all-time low. The results, the sales, everything at the time was, bottom of the pile. And within 9 months, we flipped it. It was like literally we turned that piece of paper upside down and we were second top. And not only that, I had the highest colleague engagement results. We were winning awards. We all got taken to conference. This is when you got to go on these gorgeous trips and everything. And I remember my boss saying wow, how did you do it? And I was so happy though, Sarah. And I really led from an intuitive place and led with love for those people, and I saw beyond the surface. I let people be them. I saw them as individuals. And so that's one side of it. The other side is when I've been micromanaged. I wasn't allowed to express myself, and I lost a lot of confidence. And as a result, the results in that space were not good, and I was a shell of myself. I was extremely stressed, and it led me to the point of eventually exiting out of the corporate world, if I'm completely honest. So I just wanted to give the two. I'm still the same person. I was still Jill, but it's so interesting when you are led by a leadership team in one way, how it can shape a culture, and how you can be led in another way that can completely shape a culture very, very differently. So I guess for me, it was the intuitive leadership space really allowed me to give me permission to do the same. And as a result, culture, connection, results were absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and this is why we're really passionate about intuitive leadership and what it brings to an organization. At the Intuitive Psychology Association, we work with various different corporates, helping them really establish a positive, healthy culture, within the workplace. And it is important because as Jill's example, which I'm sure I definitely resonate with, I'm sure many people listening resonate with, is work forms such a huge part of our lives. We spend the majority of our time, whenever I was in kind of a corporate environment and in that life, I saw more of my work colleagues than I did my partner, than I did family. It impacted every level. I was there we're at work all day, and if we have a good day at work, then we come home and that ripples into our family. If we have a bad day at work, that also ripples in. But when we have a really negative experience at work, not only does it impact us in work in terms of our productivity, our performance, how we engage, with other people in that team, how that ultimately shapes the culture. It impacts us in our home life as well. It impacts our health, our stress levels. And intuitive leadership, if you're kind of listening to that word and you're thinking, okay, what does that mean? Intuitive leadership for us is about the future of leadership, which, let's be honest, is going to be, is already radically different from the world that we grew up in. Whenever we first went into the world of work, you'll resonate with this if you're kind of in a similar age group to us, like 80s, kind of like babies, children. When I grew up, it was that real kind of task and control form of management, where a manager was there to really just make sure that you had worked through your list, that you didn't really bring your personal stuff into the workplace, that you were really there to do the work. And if you did the work, you get some form of perk or reward, maybe in the form of a bonus or something. What we're seeing now is this huge shift in the workplaces. Gen Z comes in as people in our age group increasingly take leadership positions as consciousness has changed. We're seeing people and organizations really need to establish a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sense of connection, a sense of empathy within their culture and environment. And this is what intuitive leadership does. Intuitive leadership is about enabling leaders to really enable their teams and their staff to trust themselves. It's enabling leaders to be able to have powerful conversations that spark connection, that enable an employee to feel more like an employee, but to feel part of a purpose, brand, and mission whose byproduct is their productivity. It's not the focus of you're here to do the work and this is an exchange. It's about heart-centered leadership that enables innovation and creativity, that enables purpose and drive and a healthy, positive culture that ultimately impacts an organization in a positive way.
Yeah, and I think anyone can, I shared 2 examples, the polarity, right? It's one was where I was allowed to be me. And as a result of that, for the company and for the culture, it was fantastic. And the other side is when you're not. And anyone listening to this, I'm sure you can take yourself back. It's like when you were at school, you always remember the good teacher. There was one teacher, and you hear this, you even see famous people, they talk about the teacher that changed their life. It is so important, as you said, Sarah, and talking to that part where you spend so much of your time at work. And when you have a great experience, and we're not saying that it isn't challenging, especially when you're managing people and situations and, KPIs and all these things, there's a lot of plates to spin. But coming from that heart-centered place, gone are the times where it's seen as weak now, right? We need to move out of that narrative, because I know when I was, definitely at points in corporate, vulnerability was seen as weak, showing your emotions was seen as weak. There was almost this kind of robotic way to be a manager. And, if you had this stern sort of, there was sometimes fear bred into spaces where you only get results for a short space of time. But we are seeing huge changes.
Massive changes.
Massive changes. We have a lot of senior leaders that come and train with us, C-suite leaders, HR leaders that actually come and train in this work to then take it back to their organizations. And, you know, we also work and consult in this, and organizations will go in and run training days. And the impact that it has is profound when you can really just let go of that way that you think you should be versus actually what's the real objective here? What is it that you want to achieve in your business? And how do you get there without having to micromanage and manage tasks and really enjoy what you do?
Yeah. This is about empowering your teams. So maybe if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, totally, I get it, I hear everything. But how does intuition show up in leadership? You know, that's kind of a new term for you. What do you mean that I'm in tune with my intuition? Like, how specifically does that work? So I think it could be helpful for us to kind of like frame exactly what we mean. So an intuitive leader, and intuition in the leadership space is about developing a deep sense of trust within your teams, trust within themselves and trust within you. So whenever we can work with our team's intuition, whenever we're able to help them understand themselves on a deeper level so that we can get the best out of them, so that we can enable them to reach their full potential, and ultimately, you know, that's a huge benefit for the business as well as that person, then that changes everything. So this goes beyond that managing. It goes beyond telling someone what to do. We're seeing managers increasingly, you know, really being those leaders in that space, being the coaches, being the mentors, being those guides to really unlock the potential of their employees and of their team members. And when we do this using intuition, what we're really doing in a leadership space and what we show corporates and organizations to do is, how do we enable that employee to get the answers for themselves? How do we enable that employee to really understand maybe why they're having a conflict with another team member, why they're being triggered by a coworker? How do we get them to maybe really understand why they don't feel confident making that call or delivering that pitch or doing that thing? And when we're able to connect that employee to their intuition, they find the answers for themselves. They realize and they don't feel like they're broken or you're telling them to change their personality or somehow be different. They feel seen, heard, and understood in the workplace. And this sparks this catalyst for change, because not only then does the employee go through this experience of really asking themselves the right questions, tapping into their own intuition, they're also able to begin to learn how to do this for themselves. So it generates this culture within the workplace of self-led employees who are deeply connected to themselves and deeply connected to each other, and ultimately in this harmonious organization that is working together towards that collective goal and that collective person. And the impact that this has on staff retention, illness rates, employee engagement, the overall culture is really and truly profound. And this is what innovative leaders really need. You know, you've already needed it already, but if you're not ahead of this and your organization isn't ahead of it, you need to get ahead of it, because everyone knows that AI is coming down the line, whether we like it or not. And we need to stop this polarity of, use AI and do everything with AI, and you know, you can outsource everything and AI will do it all for you, or forget AI and don't do anything. It's all about human potential. The reality of the future workforce is we're going to have to learn how to combine the two. If you're a leader, if you're a HR manager, what is coming down the line for you is you're going to have to learn how to manage AI agents along with the individual employee. You're going to have to learn to manage both, and that is going to require a profound level of ability to connect with humans. It's going to require more empathy. It's going to require more of your ability to coach and mentor as opposed to tightly manage and control. And most importantly, it's going to require your employees to really have a deep level of self-awareness, a deep level of intuition, to know when to trust what that AI has given them as an output, or whether or not that they need to change that employees are going to need to be more creative. They're going to need to have more innovative, diverse ways of thinking. And to do that, they need clarity. They need confidence. They need to be out of the nitty gritty, conflicts of their own inner world, of their own culture, so that they can really have that freedom to express and to think. And this is what intuitive leadership is all about. It's about how do we bring leaders and employees back to a deep sense of trust? How do we cultivate meaningful connections within the workplace? How do we stop setting boring, outdated, SMART goals that are still in the same command and control model of leadership? And how do we set goals that are more aligned, that work with the psychology of visualization, that work with the employee's intuition about where they want to go and how they want to feel and what they want for it, and how do we combine this in a cohesive culture that works together? I
love this. Oh, this girl can read my mind, right? I'm going to ask her about this actually, and you already went there with the goals. So this is the thing, right? If you really want powerful, innovative change and real culture where the buy-in is not just, I'll say I'm buying in, but I'm really not. I'm so checked out of this organization and I'm just coming in to lift my paycheck, and I'll do what I need to do and then I go home. If you really want to flip that narrative, intuitive leadership has to be the way forward, because your employee may say they're bought in, but there is a real difference between saying it and being the embodiment of a bought in employee who absolutely thrives and loves the culture of your organization. And with intuitive psychology, that is what happens, because when we can take a colleague into, and actually we do this because we work a lot with senior leaders, when we show a leadership team how to do this for themselves, it's like, wow, suddenly taking that down the line is like, it's an excitement around it. There's a real energy around it. And when they can hold that space and this suddenly their one-to-one sessions with employees look and feel so different. It is like aha moment after aha moment after aha moment. That person is so tapped into their intuition, their creativity, that it flows and it is effortless. You're not trying to pull someone along and drag people along. People feel it. It is a felt sense. It's incredible, the results that we've seen. I was going to say to you, Sarah, like, what is your favorite kind of favorite techniques that we've gone in and shared with people in organizations?
I think I've got like a top 3. There's more, but a top 3. Definitely power goals, which is our signature goal setting framework. I love this because it's very different from SMART goals. It places the authenticity at the core of the employee. It also enables like a well-formed outcome to be generated. So it's away from that, like, you need to do this and when do you need to do it by, as opposed to in power goals, it's about more a purpose-driven goal setting mechanism where you're leaning into, does this feel right for you? How motivated are you? You get so much more insight from the employee as opposed to telling them what to do. The buy-in is increased. The employee's emotionally connected to that vision or output. So they feel good about working towards what they want to work towards, and the organization undoubtedly benefits. The second one that I love is we adapt one of our techniques, working with parts, so it can be brought into organizations, so that when an employee maybe has an uncomfortable feeling that they're trying to process, maybe they're struggling with confidence, or maybe they're struggling with resilience, staying persistent and patient because maybe their role is challenging. We can coach around that and understand more about that part of the employee, what its positive intention was. We can deepen the employee's self-awareness. And because the employee increases their level of self-awareness, their clarity increases, which means their choice increases, which means they're no longer like trapped and confined to feeling one particular way. They're able to see more flexible solutions, and we're empowering the employee to make that decision like for themselves. And that has a huge impact on organizations and a huge impact on the employee feeling really seen, heard, and understood. And the final one is for conflict resolution. We use a technique called perceptual positions, which has been adapted from neuro-linguistic programming, and that really enables an employee to resolve conflict without necessarily speaking to that person without the conflict, to really see how their map of the world is being projected. And again, that has transformational results. And when we equip, look, all leaders are in leadership roles because they want to do really good and you want to empower your teams. And I think, we're seeing this real rise in heart-centered leaders who want the best, genuinely want the best for their employees. But you need the tools and the framework to be able to do that. And that's what intuitive psychology does. So whether it looks like, sometimes we'll run a day program, sometimes we will design a bespoke accreditation, which we can do for an organization as well. And when we do this, we're empowering future leaders. We're empowering your organizations now for the changes that are coming very, very quickly down the line. And this impact is huge, not only on a leader who goes on their own self-development journey, right? Yeah. They then start to understand their leadership shadow. They start to understand themselves, their thoughts, their values, how this is being projected. And as a result of this, they lead from a deeper place of intuition and authenticity. They make more intuitive decisions, okay? More decisions that are in line with themselves and with the organization's value and ethos, and less from this place of kind of like stress, pressure, their own kind of like shadow and stuff, because we're all human at the end of the day. And this takes such a I'm wildly passionate about this subject, like, as you can probably tell, we both are, because when you empower a leader, you change the culture of an organization.
That's it. You completely change the culture, but it shouldn't just be 1 in 100.
No.
And that's the thing, when my point to the beginning of this recording was that was 1 out of 20 years that I remember. And I remember him, right? It's like that one teacher, right? Yeah. Because the best that came out of me was when he allowed me to be me. And that was the magic. I was hired for a reason. And when someone else comes in, when they're not sort of tapped into that world, it can absolutely make or break a culture. And so many people leave, and so many people really lose confidence in their jobs. And they're like, they're not the person we employed. I don't know what's going on with them, but we're not equipped with the tools. But they are available, but times have changed. We need to move with it, or we're going to be left behind. And as you said, no one comes in with the intention of being a bad leader, right? But we need to first understand ourselves and then be able to, move that down the line to everyone else.
Because leadership is lonely. We've both been in leadership positions. We've both managed huge teams over multiple sites within our careers. And when you are a leader or you're in HR, there's a huge amount of pressure on you. Often we don't have maybe a supportive leader further on up the line. We kind of feel this pressure to hold our teams together. And actually, when we work with leaders in intuitive leadership, it creates a more empowered workforce, a workforce that are able to lead themselves and self-manage, a real cohesive team that is in harmony with each other. We also bring in the psychology of flow to really enable higher productivity states, but also higher mission-led teams as well, where everyone is harmoniously working as a collective whole towards the same mission and purpose. Sometimes it's even, we'll do days whenever we're helping an organization understand what that mission and purpose is, above and beyond profits and sales. As humans, we need meaning, and increasingly in the workplace, it's more important. And when AI comes in, it's going to be even more important for that employee to feel like a sense of what I do here matters, what I do here counts, what I do here makes a difference. Because see, whenever you turn up to work and you feel like you're making a difference in our business, that's what we feel like we do. It sparks creativity, it sparks ideas, you go that extra mile. And whenever you're able to give that to your employees, this mission-led culture, it is absolutely incredible to see the difference that it makes. And this is more than a tick box exercise. This isn't just, going through the motions of it or just the noise of, we're purpose driven and we do this, but it's not really a felt sense. We can show, and we do show leaders exactly how to do this. Like you said, we have HR professionals, either who work for organizations and their employees pay them to come and train with us, or HR professionals who are freelancers and self-employed who recognize that actually AI is going to take over, a lot of what they do. And already their role has changed over the past few years. It's not just about, did you meet this regulation? Yes or no? Okay. Have you filled in this? It's more about that culture and giving them the leading edge in a space, being able to coach that like senior leaders in that space as well. So it's hugely important work. We're really excited to spread this work even further as we kind of continue into the year. Sure. And if you're curious about intuitive leadership or have some thoughts on it, then we definitely love to hear from you.
Yeah, I just want to end on something that we share quite a lot, and it's probably on our website. One of our sayings is we don't have an information gap. We have an intuition gap.
Yeah.
And so how do we bring people back to intuition? That is the seed. That is the key to everything, is really bringing ourselves and people back to that and leading from that space, because we can outsource all the information. And as you mentioned with AI, it's a click of a finger, less than a click of a finger. We can get our hands on that information. But what it can't do is deeply connect you to a connection with someone else.
Definitely. Right? And also I think, we're like sent me on a tangent. We're meant to be wrapping up. It's a classic, absolute classic. But also information in terms of, I think we've seen corporates go through that era, a positive era that corporates, organizations, businesses are really recognizing the importance of employee well-being, and you're equipping them with the information. Here's a handout, here's a resource that you can read, here's access to, some online videos that you can watch, or hey, here's a well-being day. And it's not really shifting culture in the right way.
It's not anymore.
It's not anymore.
It's not enough. Say that, it's not enough. We need to do better.
Yeah. And when you when you train leaders up, in intuitive leadership, it's at the heart of everything that you do, and the ripple effect is absolutely profound. And it's those, better humans create like better workplaces that ultimately create better worlds. It's where innovation is sparked, new ideas come together, there's like collaborations, there's a decrease in conflict, there's an increase in employee engagement. And I think we all need that in the workplace.
We need it in the world. It's beyond workplace. And when you do this, it doesn't just limit it to the workplace. It is the way you parent. It is the way you deal with conflict in your personal life outside of work. It doesn't just stop in the workplace, and that is the power of intuitive leadership. We are wildly passionate about it. We are on a huge mission to share this work with more employers, because it is so needed, and it's different. It's different from what anyone else is doing right now, Sarah. And I'm exceptionally proud of what we're seeing in huge organisations already with this work. And I'm excited to see where it's going to go.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks. And we'll speak to you all in the next episode.